So my topic is allophonic alterations or borrowed phonemes, and I would like to in the contents I would discuss the next slide, please. I would give just a brief introduction, and then the major part of my talk will be on the debate on allophones on phonemes and on my findings, and then I would conclude. So for all of this, I will take only 15 minutes. So next slide, please. So in the introduction, I would like to say that allophonic alterations from loan words occurred in varied combinations in Hindi. This is a very well researched and well discussed topic for almost 7 to 8 decades now. The loan words borrowed in Hindi are from Sanskrit, Persian, Urdu, and Arabic, and all of these form minimal pairs in the language. And I would argue that these loan words have come into Hindi from a different phonological system, and they have become part of Hindi phonological system. And I would also discuss how they are realized by the speakers. Are they, according to the speakers, are they allophonic or they are phonemic? And if they are allophonic, are they near correspondences or are they exact utterances? Next slide, please. So first, let me come up with the debate on allophones and phonemes. So the five loan consonant sounds which I would discuss are k, that is the voiceless non-aspirated uvular plosive. This is a stop sound, and the other four consonant sounds are fricatives. That is k, voiceless velar fricative, g. I'm sorry. This is voiced uvular fricative. F. This is voiceless labiodental fricative, and z, voiced alveolar fricative. Next slide, please. So the first, there are two claims of the researchers on these sounds. The first claim was to accept them as sounds from the loan words not assimilated in the phonetic inventory of the language. For example, Ohala study 1983, Ramakant Agnihotri study in 2007, and the Karnad and Lahiri study in 2020. So first I begin with Ohala. Next slide, please. Oh, no, let it be. Let this slide be. So Ohala had in 1972 had mentioned that these three sounds, that is k, k, and g, appear only in the speech of Urdu speakers and are thus not part of Hindi phonetics. She also mentioned that these are realized only in hyper-corrected pronunciation, and even if they are there, for example, she had mentioned that k as in Khalid, k as in Kalam, and g as in Ghalib are sometimes represented by k, k, g, and these are near correspondences of the sounds. So does the modern Hindi speaker, MSH speaker, accept the fact that these may not speak, that they may not speak these at all, any or all of these at all, but they are active listeners to these sounds in spoken discourses? And what is their opinion after 5 decades? I mentioned this in 1972, and now it is 2021, so it is almost 5 decades. And in my assessment as an active listener of Hindi, for as in fork, that is separation, coming from Arabic fark, and z as in zulf, that is lock of hair, coming from Persian zulf, are used by all Hindi speakers, and these two sounds are also found in the borrowed sound English words. This Professor Tej Bhatia had also stated that these are there because of the English, they are there in English, and the sound features which are borrowed from Arabic and Persian are same as they are in English. So and z, even though they are not part of the Indo-Aryan phonological system which Hindi has, these fricatives have come, or they are assimilated in the language because of the English words. These sounds have come from English. So listeners have also become used to the loan words with labiodental fricative and the alveolar fricative, as they have been borrowed from the language of their origin and not to their closest correspondences. The frequent use of loan words in the language attests to the occurrence of loan sounds in the language. Agnihotri's the same slides. Agnihotri's 2007 Hindi and Essential Grammar lists 5 consonant sounds in a footnote and mentions them as some consonant sounds used rather infrequently now. And Agnihotri has acknowledged g as in kagas. Only this fricative is acknowledged by him. The others he has not acknowledged. And the total number of Hindi sounds is Hindi phonetic consonants. The Hindi consonant sounds is 36, and the other loan fricatives appearing in the language is not there in his grammar. According to Kennard and Lahiri 2020, show that they had written a paper in 2020. The title is None Such Phonemes in Loan Words, where they have worked with Bengali retroflex sounds, English voice fricatives, and Swiss German initial geminates. And they have argued that loan words alone cannot introduce a new phoneme into a language unless there are special circumstances. And their claim is the borrowed new phonemes have emerged from allophonic alterations of the existing phonemes of the language. So for Hindi, we are faced with a situation where we have the stop sounds and the fricative sounds. Now, a fricative sound cannot be an allophonic alteration for a plosive, or cannot be an allophonic alteration for a stop sound. And the five consonant sounds in the discussion, four are fricatives. K, G, and for and Z. Only K is the uvular K is not a fricative. It is a stop, and it occurs in minimal pair with K. For example, halka, that is light in weight in Hindi, is in minimal pair with halka, that is a circle in Arabic, which originates from Arabic halka. So the next slide, please. The second claim the next slide, please. The second claim is these sounds are not allophonic in the language, and they are more like phonemes and can be considered as loan phonemes borrowed from non-Indo-Aryan languages. For example, Michael Shapiro in 2003, Yamuna Kachru in 2006, and Omkar N. Kaul in 2008. So I come to Shapiro 2003. So Shapiro in 2003 said that borrowing of words from languages other than Sanskrit and their use in multiple mediums have become frequent more or less from the years subsequent to 1950s. It was during this time that the new vocabulary was coined for newspaper, radio, and television broadcast, and the addition of the addition to the vocabulary with the loan sounds began to be widely used in public spheres. So, according to Shapiro, to a great extent, these modifications are carried out by the addition of diacritics to the Devanagari characters used in Sanskrit. Now, these diacritics indicate the loan phonemes are not always consistent, and so there are no fixed norms for to represent the graphemes for these borrowed phonemes. Or I can say phonetic symbols. There are no fixed norms. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the term graphic. I should say phonetic symbols. The total number of consonant phonemes would be 40 in the consonant sounds with the loan sounds. However, Shapiro has used the term loan phoneme in his chapter on Hindi for loan sounds that exist in the pronunciation of some might put into inverted commas, some Hindi speakers, and are sometimes again in inverted commas, recorded in careful writing. To designate the sounds borrowed from Arabic, Persian, Portuguese, and English, he has included 5 additional sounds in the table on the consonant phonemes. Following the table, there is a discussion mentioning k as a uvular voiceless stop and k as voiceless velar fricative. There is no symbol for voiced uvular fricative, even though we have its mention over there. For as a labiodental voiceless fricative, which can be realized in close correspondence, not in its with its real phonetic features, and z as voiced group sibilant.
So this is, yes, sir. Five more minutes.
Okay. Yamuna Kachru in 2006 has introduced ka as a post-velar plosive. So there is a contrast between what Shapiro says and what Yamuna says. Yamuna says ka is a voiceless post-velar plosive. Shapiro says it is a uvular voiceless stop. Okay. Kaul, in his modern Hindi grammar in 2008, has talked about the 3 of the 5 borrowed sounds phonemes in discussion, and there are next slide please, quite a number of additions to what this is what the Kaul and Kaul says, and Kaul has discussed the range of, for instance, next slide please. Yeah. So some of these, have added to what Kaul has said, because there are also medial and final occurrences of this sound, and I have discussed this in detail in my paper. Okay. In Takikat and Hakikat, we can see that the sound can occur in multiple, in consecutive syllables. Next slide, please. In this sound, this is already mentioned of it occurs as medial, final, and initial sound. Next slide, please. In the cluster presentations, also there are the number of additions over here, and the sounds which are borrowed from Arabic are not always the same that is retained in Hindi. Because sometimes sounds like nusa. Here in Persian, we don't get a long vowel at the end, but in Nusa in Hindi, that is prescription. Nuksa. Nusad, we find the final vowel to be elongated. Also, there are additions of syllables. For example, in saksiyat, it comes from Arabic saksia. And baksis, S is palatalized over here. There is a palatalization from on the word from Persian. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, findings. This is for occurrences which I have given some examples. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is range of occurrences of four. Okay, in the clusters where we can find it as geminate, and similar in for Z also. For example, ZZ, it can occur in Izzat, Razak, and so on. Okay, next slide, please. This is again for the voice to video fricatives with minimal pairs. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here we have a insertion of vowel. For example, Mughli, Mughli, it was in Persian. In the U, interconsonantal U is deleted. Okay, next slide, please. So far, scholars have recognized the presence of all or some of these borrowed sounds in the language, but there have been some varied opinions in the past on their use by the speakers, implicitly assuming them to be allophonic variants of the existing phonemes, appearing only on the footnote or being termed as results of lexical borrowings is not enough. They are yet to be recognized as full-fledged phonemes even after their nativization into Hindi long back. Hindi speakers today are sensitive to careful utterances of borrowed sound segments. Can the borrowed sounds have the privilege of fixed phonetic and phonemic status from native and non-native speakers, which is long due for them? Such a recognition would be appropriate for their purpose. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you. And these are some of my references which I have used, which I have consulted. And thank you.
Dr. Sumana, I think that the sound Z, as I listen to you, I happen to hear Z. The sound is used by Hindi is exactly the same sound as we hear in Arabic. Can you give us some example?
Yes, of course. Since you have asked out, from the clusters I can say, for example, like kabza. Okay, like Caesar. This has come from Arabic kabza. The final A is elongated. It is lengthened. Final vowel is lengthened in Hindi, whereas the final vowel is short in Arabic. For example, rozgar, employment. It comes from Persian. This is not Arabic. Then we have manzil, destination. This comes from Arabic manzil. And we have izzat, honor, coming from Arabic izza. The final T, the final consonant T, the dental T is not there in Arabic, but it has been added in Hindi. And then we have karza, loan, that is from Arabic. I don't have the original word, it was not there in the book, in the vocabulary which I had consulted. Mirzab, it comes from Arabic mirzab. The Z is palatalized, this Z, which is alveolar fricative, it has a certain other colors in Arabic. The Z in Arabic, we don't usually pronounce it, we don't have it in Hindi, but it has certain retroflex features in Arabic. And Hazrat, this is Harza, and Hazrat in Persian. Harza in Arabic and Hazrat in Persian.
So, thank you. So,
there was also one vowel sound, I would just like to add, which I have not included, because that has also, Hindi has also borrowed a vowel sound. I have only talked about the consonants. Yes, thank you.
I just had a little like data question. So was there like any variation that you found, like in these like so-called allophones or phonemes? Did you find any variations? Like, for example, maybe the is subject to less variation than, for example, the uvular cur. Did you find anything like that?
The moment you call them, you see them to be in free variation with another phoneme. For example, a stop sound in free variation with another stop sound. Then there are near correspondences. They are not the exact ones the sounds which we are used to. Which we as non-native Hindi speakers. Always treasure those features of Hindi which are more like Arabic and Persian. While learning, we are told that you should learn the consonant features like the fricatives they are in, as they are borrowed in, or as they are in the loan words. You cannot nativize them otherwise. But these words have been so much assimilated into Hindi over such a long period of time. They are very much part of Hindi, and their utterances are, they are inseparable. You cannot separate. If you pronounce something for example, akal, the k of akal as akal, then it would sound rather non-standard. So, I don't see that there is much justice to that. Uttering something in its with its near correspondences, or something near to that sound. The sound should be exactly pronounced the way it is done in the for that particular loan word. So free variations, or you can say the free variations with stops, or free variations with another fricative. There are of course speakers who have variations in pronunciations, but that is taken to be non-standard. Yeah, that is what the linguists have said.
Okay. Thank you.